The sound of a metal crunch echoed through the quiet suburban morning as the HOA enforcers yanked Sarah's mailbox from its post, the freshly painted red steel buckling under their brute force. She watched in horror from her living room window, heart pounding. "What are you doing?" she shouted, rushing outside. The two men in crisp polo shirts ignored her, tossing the mangled box into the back of a nondescript sedan. By order of the Homeowners Association, this mailbox is in violation of community standards, one of them stated flatly. It will be confiscated and replaced. "You can't just take my mailbox," Sarah protested, her voice cracking. "I spent weeks designing that. It matches the trim on my house perfectly." The enforcers climbed into their vehicle, the mailbox clanging in the trunk. "This discussion is over. You have 30 days to install an approved mailbox model, or you'll face fines." With that, they sped off down the street, leaving Sarah trembling in their wake. She stared at the empty post, mind racing. This was her home, her sanctuary. How dare they violate it like this? Anger boiled inside her, mixing with a deep sense of powerlessness. The HOA was notorious for its petty tyranny, but she never imagined they'd go this far. Gripping the post, Sarah let out a scream of frustration that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Tears stung her eyes as she surveyed the damage, realizing her carefully crafted mailbox was now just twisted scrap metal. After composing herself, she stormed back inside, slamming the door behind her. Her husband, Mark, looked up from his breakfast, eyes wide with concern. "The HOA just took my mailbox," she blurted out. "They said it's a violation, and I have 30 days to replace it." Mark's brow furrowed. "What? That's ridiculous. Your mailbox looks great. Why would they do that?" "I don't know." Sarah paced the kitchen, clenching her fists. "They just showed up and ripped it off the post. I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen." Crossing the room, Mark placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her. Okay, let's think this through. There has to be something we can do." Sarah shook her head, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "I can't believe they're getting away with this. It's my mailbox. How can they just take it?" "We'll fight this," Mark said firmly. "I'll call the HOA president, see if we can get this resolved. In the meantime, we need to get you a new mailbox installed before the deadline." Nodding reluctantly, Sarah took a deep breath. The HOA had crossed a line, and she wasn't about to let them win without a fight. As Mark made the call, a seed of determination took root in her mind. This was war. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself in a frantic battle against the HOA's demands. Mark had called the president, but the man remained unyielding. The mailbox had to be replaced, period. Scouring local hardware stores, Sarah searched for an approved mailbox model, but each one felt like a poor substitute for her personalized creation. The bland, generic designs didn't capture her home's character at all. One evening, as she stared at a stack of catalogs, an idea began to form. If the HOA wanted conformity, she would give them conformity, but with a twist. "What if we build the biggest, most outrageous mailbox they've ever seen?" she suggested to Mark. "Something so over the top that they'll have no choice but to approve it." Her husband's eyes widened. "You mean like a 10-foot steel fortress or something?" Sarah nodded, a mischievous gleam in her eye. "Exactly. Let's show them that they can't just bully us around." Mark hesitated, stroking his chin. "I don't know, honey. That seems like it could just make things worse. The HOA is already angry. This might push them too far." "I don't care," Sarah said firmly. "They started this fight, and I'm going to finish it. I'm not letting them get away with destroying my mailbox." Sensing the determination in her voice, Mark sighed in resignation. All right. If this is what you want to do, I'll help you. But promise me you'll be careful, okay? I don't want you to end up in legal trouble over this." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I promise. This is going to work, I can feel it. Over the next few days, the couple threw themselves into the project, sketching designs and sourcing materials. Sarah was meticulous in her planning, determined to create a mailbox that would make a bold statement. As the deadline loomed, the frame began to take shape, a towering, steel-reinforced structure that would dwarf the standard mailboxes lining the street. Sarah had spared no expense, using heavy-gauge metal and a custom paint job to bring her vision to life. Finally, the day of installation arrived. With a sense of nervous anticipation, Sarah and Mark set to work, carefully positioning the massive mailbox on the post. When they were done, they stood back, surveying their creation. "Well, here goes nothing," Sarah murmured, a mix of anxiety and determination in her voice. "Time to see what the HOA thinks of this." The next morning, Sarah watched anxiously from her window as the HOA enforcement vehicle slowly cruised down the street. She held her breath, waiting for the inevitable reaction. As the car approached her house, the driver slowed to a crawl, his eyes widening in disbelief at the sight of the towering steel mailbox. After a moment, he pulled over and climbed out, marching up the driveway with a scowl. "What is the meaning of this?" the man demanded, glaring up at the imposing structure. "This is not an approved mailbox design." Sarah steeled herself and stepped outside to meet him. "It is now," she said firmly. "I followed all the HOA guidelines to the letter: size, color, materials. This mailbox is completely within the rules." The enforcer scoffed, circling the mailbox as if inspecting it for flaws. "This is ridiculous. It's far too large and ostentatious. It's an eyesore, and it needs to be removed immediately." "I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen," Sarah replied, standing her ground. "I went to great lengths to create a mailbox that meets your standards. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the HOA board." The man's face flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable. You have 48 hours to take this down, or we'll start fining you." "Fine me all you want," Sarah shot back. "I'm not removing my mailbox. You're the ones who destroyed the one I had. This is my replacement, and it's staying right where it is." Glaring at her, the enforcer turned and stomped back to his car, muttering under his breath. As he drove away, Sarah let out a deep breath, her heart pounding. She'd stood up to the HOA, and for now, it seemed to have worked. Stepping back inside, she found Mark watching anxiously from the kitchen. "How did it go?" he asked. "They're not happy about it," Sarah admitted. "The enforcer threatened to fine us if we don't take it down, but I told him it's not going anywhere." Mark's brow furrowed. "Are you sure that's a good idea? I mean, the HOA can be pretty ruthless when they want to be. We don't want to end up in legal trouble over this." I know," Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "But I'm not backing down, Mark. This is my home, and I'm not letting them bully me anymore. If they want a fight, they've got one." Her husband studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. I'll be here to support you, no matter what happens." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude, reaching out to give his hand a reassuring squeeze. With Mark by her side, she knew she could face whatever the HOA threw at them. This was a battle she was determined to win. Over the next few days, the tension in the neighborhood escalated as the HOA's threats against Sarah's oversized mailbox continued. Flyers were distributed, warning residents about the rogue homeowner who was jeopardizing the community's aesthetics. Sarah found herself the target of dirty looks and hushed whispers as she went about her daily routine. Neighbors who had once greeted her warmly now averted their eyes, afraid of incurring the HOA's wrath by associating with her. The harassment came to a head one afternoon when a group of HOA enforcers showed up at her door, demanding that she remove the mailbox immediately. "This is your final warning," the lead enforcer declared, his voice dripping with disdain. "Take down that monstrosity, or we'll have no choice but to take legal action." Sarah stood her ground, refusing to back down. I'm not removing my mailbox. You had no right to take the one I had, and I'm not going to let you bully me into replacing it with something I don't want." The enforcers exchanged frustrated glances, their expressions darkening. "Well, don't say we didn't warn you," the lead enforcer sneered. "You'll be hearing from our lawyers." As the enforcers stalked away, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She knew the HOA was serious about this, and they wouldn't hesitate to use the full force of the law to try and get their way. Retreating back into the house, she found Mark pacing the living room, his face etched with worry. "I heard the commotion outside," he said, his voice tense. "What did they say?" Sarah recounted the confrontation, watching as her husband's expression grew increasingly grim. "Lawyers? Damn it, Sarah. I was afraid this would happen," he said, running a hand through his hair. "The HOA is not going to back down on this. We could be facing some serious legal trouble." I know, Sarah sighed, sinking into a chair. "But I can't just give in, Mark. This is my home, and I'm not going to let them steamroll me." Mark perched on the arm of the chair, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I understand, honey. I'm with you on this. But we need to be smart about it. We can't just dive headfirst into a legal battle with the HOA. They have way more resources than we do." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowing in thought. "So what do we do? Just sit back and let them win?" "No, not at all," Mark said firmly. "We fight, but we do it carefully. We need to find a way to beat them at their own game, without risking everything we have." Sarah's eyes narrowed as a plan began to take shape in her mind. "Well then, I guess it's time to get a little more creative." In the days that followed, Sarah and Mark launched a multi-pronged strategy to take on the HOA. First, they reached out to their neighbors, hoping to rally support and shed light on the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. To their surprise, many of the residents were more sympathetic than they'd expected. Word of the mailbox dispute had spread quickly, and several homeowners expressed their own frustrations with the HOA's rigid rules and overzealous enforcement. "They tried to fine me for having my trash cans out too long," one neighbor confided. "It's ridiculous. We're all adults here, not children." Sarah seized on this sentiment, organizing a community meeting to discuss the HOA's actions and explore options for challenging their authority. The turnout was impressive, with nearly half the neighborhood in attendance. "The HOA is supposed to be here to protect our property values and maintain the community standards," Sarah told the crowd, her voice firm and resolute. "But instead, they're using their power to bully and intimidate us. Enough is enough." A murmur of agreement swept through the room, and several residents stood to share their own stories of HOA overreach. It was clear that Sarah and Mark were not alone in their fight. Emboldened by this show of solidarity, the couple then turned their attention to the legal front. They reached out to a local attorney who specialized in homeowners' rights, seeking advice on how to navigate the impending battle with the HOA. "You've got a strong case," the lawyer assured them. "The HOA's actions in removing your original mailbox were likely a violation of your property rights, and their threats of legal action over the replacement mailbox could be construed as harassment." Sarah felt a surge of hope. "So what can we do?" "Well, the first step is to file a formal complaint with the HOA board," the lawyer explained. "Demand that they rescind their order to remove the mailbox and cease any further legal action. If they refuse, we can take them to court." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "And what are our chances of winning?" "Quite good, actually," the lawyer replied. "The courts tend to side with homeowners in these types of disputes, especially when the HOA has overstepped its bounds. You just need to be prepared to fight this all the way." Sarah exchanged a determined glance with her husband. "We're ready," she said firmly. "This is our home, and we're not going to let the HOA take it from us." With a renewed sense of purpose, the couple set to work, drafting their formal complaint and gathering evidence to support their case. They were done playing by the HOA's rules. it was time to take the fight to them. Over the next few weeks, the battle between Sarah, Mark, and the HOA escalated dramatically. After receiving their formal complaint, the board had reluctantly agreed to a special meeting to discuss the mailbox issue. The day of the meeting arrived, and the couple sat nervously in the cramped community center, flanked by a growing contingent of supportive neighbors. Across the room, the HOA board members eyed them warily, their expressions a mix of irritation and concern. When the meeting was called to order, Sarah stood and addressed the board, her voice clear and unwavering. Homeowners Association, we're here today to demand that you rescind your order to remove my mailbox, she began, her gaze sweeping across the panel. That mailbox was a carefully crafted expression of my personal style, and you had no right to take it away. One of the board members, a stern-faced woman, shook her head dismissively. The mailbox was in clear violation of our community standards. It was an eyesore that had to be removed. Standards? Sarah scoffed. Your standards are nothing more than a set of arbitrary rules designed to strip us of our individuality, and you enforce them in the most heavy-handed way possible. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement, and Sarah felt a surge of confidence. Glancing at Mark, she saw him nod encouragingly, his eyes alight with determination. We've done our research, Sarah continued, and your actions were a clear violation of our property rights. You had no legal justification to take my mailbox, and were prepared to take this all the way to court if necessary. The board members exchanged anxious glances, sensing the growing hostility in the room. The HOA president, a balding man with a perpetual frown, cleared his throat and leaned forward. Now let's not be too hasty here, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. I'm sure we can find a compromise that works for everyone. A compromise? Sarah scoffed. The only compromise I'm interested in is you restoring my mailbox and leaving me alone. Anything less, and we'll see you in court. The room erupted in thunderous applause, and Sarah felt a surge of triumph. The HOA was on the defensive, and she knew they were scared. This was a battle they couldn't afford to lose. As the meeting descended into heated debate, Sarah sat back, a small smile playing on her lips. The HOA had picked the wrong homeowner to mess with. The tension in the community center was palpable as the HOA board members huddled together, whispering furiously. Sarah and Mark watched from their seats, their hearts pounding with anticipation. After what felt like an eternity, the HOA president stood and cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. We decided to take this matter under further consideration, he announced, his voice wavering slightly. We'll convene a special session to discuss the issue in more depth and reach a final decision. A chorus of disgruntled murmurs swept through the crowd, and Sarah felt her blood boil. They were stalling, hoping to wear her and the other residents down. That's unacceptable, she declared, rising from her seat. You've had more than enough time to consider this. We want a decision, and we want it now. The president's eyes narrowed, and he straightened his posture, clearly trying to regain his composure. Mrs. Williamson, I understand your frustration, but this is a complex issue that requires careful deliberation. We cannot be rushed into a decision that could have far-reaching consequences for the community. Sarah opened her mouth to retort, but Mark placed a hand on her arm, silently urging her to let him take the lead. With all due respect, Mr. President, Mark said, his voice measured and calm, your community has already been subjected to the consequences of your hasty decision-making. Removing my wife's mailbox without warning or justification was a clear violation of our rights as homeowners. The president's brow furrowed, and he opened his mouth to respond, but Mark pressed on. Now we're giving you a chance to make this right. Restore the mailbox, rescind your order, and put an end to this unnecessary conflict. If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to take legal action. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the HOA board. Sarah could feel the tension crackling in the air, and she held her breath, waiting for their response. After a long, agonizing pause, The president cleared his throat again. "Very well," he said, his voice tight with reluctance. We'll agree to restore the mailbox and retract our order. But let this be a lesson to all of you. The HOA's rules are in place for a reason, and we expect full compliance going forward." The room erupted in cheers and applause, and Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had won. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah and Mark found themselves surrounded by their jubilant neighbors, offering congratulations and heartfelt thanks. "You showed those HOA bullies who's boss," one man exclaimed, clapping Mark on the back. Sarah beamed, reveling in the triumph. The HOA had tried to break her, but she had emerged victorious. This was a win not just for her, but for the entire community. As they made their way home, Sarah turned to Mark, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." Mark pulled her into a tight embrace, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Yes, we did," he murmured, "and I couldn't be prouder of you." In the weeks that followed, the restored mailbox became a symbol of defiance and community solidarity in the neighborhood. Neighbors would often stop to admire the towering steel structure, sharing stories of their own battles with the HOA. Sarah and Mark's victory had emboldened the residents, who began to push back against the HOA's more heavy-handed tactics. Complaints were filed, community meetings were held, and a sense of collective empowerment began to take root. The HOA board, sensing the shifting tide of public sentiment, found themselves on the defensive. Their attempts to reassert their authority were met with fierce resistance as homeowners banded together to protect their rights and individuality. One by one, the board members began to resign, unable to stomach the growing backlash. The HOA's once ironclad grip on the community had been broken, and a new era of grassroots governance was beginning to take shape. Sarah and Mark watched the transformation with a sense of pride and accomplishment. Their mailbox battle had been the catalyst for a much larger movement, one that would shape the future of their neighborhood for years to come. As the final HOA enforcer pulled away, Sarah turned to her husband, a broad smile on her face. "Can you believe it?" she said, marveling at the changes around them. "We actually won." Mark pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I never doubted you for a second, honey," he murmured. "You're a force to be reckoned with." Sarah chuckled, resting her head against his chest. "Well, I learned from the best. This was a team effort, after all." They stood there for a moment, basking in the tranquility of their victory. The mailbox stood tall and proud, a testament to the power of standing up for one's beliefs and the triumph of the human spirit over petty bureaucracy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. This was her home, her sanctuary, and she had fought to defend it. And in the end, she had emerged victorious. With a contented sigh, she turned to Mark, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "So, what do you say we start planning our next project?" she asked, a twinkle in her eye. "I'm thinking a 20-foot castle-themed mailbox, just to keep the HOA on their toes." Mark laughed, shaking his head in amusement. "Lead the way, my dear. I'm with you all the way." And so, the battle-tested couple set off, ready to take on the world one creative mailbox at a time, their unwavering spirit a shining beacon for all those who dared to stand up and fight.